Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Beyond the Cage. I'm your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is my co-host, the Juice, Dave Sadler. On this week's show, we'll go over a host of some UFC headlines this week, and of course, we're going to pick the main card fights for UFC Fight Night 65, better known as UFC Fight Night Miocic versus Hunt from Adelaide, Australia, this Saturday/Sunday morning. At least here in the U.S., but it will be, I believe, Sunday evening in Australia. But either way, that will be shown exclusively live on the UFC Fight Pass. And for those of you who listen to the show each and every week, I'm still a little bit under the weather, not as bad as last week. As you guys probably saw, I was coughing a lot this week. A little more under control, but if you do hear me cough again, I apologize, and I'll try to do my best to not get it caught here on the audio or video or anything. But how's it going, Dave?
Pretty good. Still on that day shift, so I get out of work at a decent time. That's exciting. Our guys at MMA Team Genesis have a big fight this weekend right here in town. Our good friend Doug Keast has the number one ranked lightweight amateur in the state of Illinois. He's defending his title against the number 2 ranked lightweight. How about that? So that's pretty exciting. And yeah, that's about it. That's all I got going on.
I don't know if he's fighting specifically on the card you just mentioned, but I know he has a fight coming up. I've seen a lot of the posts, but I know he listens each and every week, and I felt about time we give him a shout out. But Nico,
yeah,
he has a fight coming up, right?
Yeah, Nico Boom Boom Jefferson. Yeah, he's the number 1 ranked lightweight in the state.
Okay. That's who I thought it was, but I didn't want to steal his thunder just in case I was wrong.
Oh, that's him. He's a hometown guy. Place will be packed. Packed for him. He always sells a bunch of tickets, and he backs it up.
Well, here's your shout out, Nico. Look forward. Dave will probably give us the breakdown on your fight, but I wish you much success. And again, you always publicize the show to all your friends on Facebook, so we thank you for doing that, and obviously thank you for listening too. So I'll give you a shout out here on Beyond the Cage. All right. Before we get into some of these, the big headline is, I guess you could say, maybe the Hall of Fame thing, Dave. But one small note you mentioned just before we came on air, and kind of sticking with the Fight Pass theme for this weekend, the UFC has removed all traces of Jon Jones from the UFC Fight Pass. So they are doing their best to kind of scrub Jon Jones away from the UFC.
Yeah. Oh, that's weird. How about that? Jon Jones, Daniel Cormier is on here. That's weird. But when you click on it, nothing happens. That's exciting.
So it's not all the way gone.
Yeah, I clicked on it, and it seems to be loading. Maybe it just shows Cormier, and they've scrubbed Jones out of the picture. So he's training. No, Jones is in it. No, that's weird. I don't know. I think they took him, like, anything about Jones, like the individual videos about him, because I think the fights they can't get rid of the fights, but anything that they've done to promote him is gone.
Yeah, it'd be kind of hard to get rid of all the individual fights, but yeah, I think they're trying to make his presence less felt in the UFC, and that would include their streaming on-demand service as well. So I just thought it was an interesting note. I figured I'd pass along just in case some fans of Fight Pass were still looking for Jon Jones stuff. They can find it. And speaking of Jon Jones, our good friend Nick from A&N Sports, he does those, the case breaks and whatnot. And this is one of the cards I got from his most recent, 2 cards I got from his most recent case break. And then the Jon Jones stuff happened, and I thought, man, probably, I don't think that's worth much anymore, right? So,
yeah.
Just in case anyone's number, that's a number to 8 card.
It's worth just about as much as
And then I have this one here, which
It's
is
as much as this Jordan Me and base card. That's what
probably. Though I think this one, even though it has Jones on it, I think this one would still be worth something.
Yeah.
It has Weidman, Mighty Mouse, and who's the other one on here? Aldo. So he'll still devalue it slightly.
Poor old Jones.
Man, that's speaking of which, we go ahead and talk to AJ in a while. I wonder how much, if he has to put his John Jones stuff on clearance.
Yeah, I saw he was doing something 20% off or something.
And it's funny because remember when we talked to him a while ago, we kind of mentioned who was maybe the most difficult guy to deal with or guy he didn't like dealing with, and he said John Jones.
Yeah.
As a guy that that wasn't as nice and willing, and something like this happens, maybe AJ knew something we didn't.
I'm on MMA Signatures USA right now, and I typed in John Jones. Doesn't look like anything's been cut in price. An official John Jones is still $149.99.
I mean, official gloves are hard. For people who don't know, official gloves are hard to come by and hard to come by at a good deal. And if they do come at a good deal, AJ is probably the first to snap them up. I will say that. I mean, if you've been to a UFC event recently, you go to the merchandise booth. This is a pair is $80. So that means before you even get it signed, the glove is at least $40, if not more, depending on where you get it and if you paid shipping. And that's not including tax either.
Yeah,
they're not cheap.
No.
Just to let you know why the if you're looking at prices in your head. But anyways, all right, let's get to I want to get to these matchups, Dave, that were recently announced by the UFC. Two big fights. First, you had Alexander Gustafsson got hurt. He was supposed to main event a Fight Pass fight coming up here for Berlin, Germany. So he's out of the fight. That leaves Glover Teixeira kind of in limbo, though I guess the rumor has it he may or may not fill in for Daniel Cormier against Ryan Bader on that Louisiana card and have Bader and Glover too, which to me seems like a pretty nice scenario for the UFC. Nothing official has been made yet, but to me that seems like a slam dunk because we were kind of wondering what Bader was going to do. And to me, the door's kind of been opening, especially that fight, even though Glover knocked him out, was pretty close. Bader had Glover hurt. That wasn't like Glover just running over Ryan Bader in 3 minutes or anything. That was a competitive fight that Glover just finished. So I think that is a pretty good rematch. And if Bader can kind of avenge that, he definitely asserts himself as, top contender status.
Yeah. First of all, I would be happy with that kind of matchup because I'll be there. If they did it on the New Orleans card. But I saw something that Bader said that he's not going to stop training because in case anything makes sense for him. I mean, which I would assume, if Rumble falls out, DC falls out, something, that he can get right in there to that contender status, which always seems to be like the right thing to do. If your opponent gets put into a higher profile matchup, keep training and hopefully if something happens, you can slide in. But Bader seems to have the worst of luck, doesn't he?
Yeah, right now he definitely does. So, yeah, he's kind of. We'll see. I still think there's a chance that could be the main event for that card. We mentioned maybe. I think he ended up just getting a matchup booked, but I mentioned a guy like Jean Vellante would have been maybe a cool fill-in, but. Anyways, so that's a hypothetical matchup, but the matchup that's now replacing Bader and Gustafsson as the main event for that Berlin Fight Pass card is a title fight. Joanna Jędrzejczyk, right there from Poland, she'll be making her first ever title defense, and she will be taking on the first ever Invicta atomweight champion, Jessica Penne. Now, a lot of people are up in arms, I guess, maybe about Jessica Penne getting this title shot. But you and I, Dave, thought Penne could get the first shot at the title post-Ultimate Fighter. So I'm not sure why most people are maybe upset or puzzled by this, because first of all, there's not a clear number one contender. So let's
No.
get that straight. So if they had to pick somebody, I think Jessica Penne had to be at the top of the list. I mean, if you want to look at the way she finished on the show, you could say she finished third. She fought Randa Marcos in like the two semifinal, loser matchup, and she won that. So if you're looking, the UFC had that all the ladies ranked on that show, which kind of almost was like a signal for rankings of the division. And she was ranked, I believe, fourth coming in. And I guess you could say she finished third. I don't think it's that much of a stretch to say that she's ready for a title shot. And I know a lot of people are already picking Joanna. Of course, she had a very dominant performance and title win over Carla Esparza. But I think Jessica Penne is a pretty tough matchup. Now, of course, she's not the wrestler that Esparza is. I think she has a little more stand-up. But I also think that her grappling skills, she's a little more clingy, and I think she has a more submission-based attack. She's not simply looking to be on top and land damage. She's a lot more submission savvy than Carla Esparza, and I think that might be a little more difficult to deal with for Joanna than Carla was. Now, I'm not saying Joanna can't win. I'm just saying I actually think it might be more of an intriguing matchup.
Yeah, I think that the downfall of this matchup, is the fact that we haven't seen Penne since December at the Ultimate Fighter finale. It doesn't seem like it's that long ago, but a lot of stuff has taken place since that happened. That was on, what was it, on Fox Sports 1?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like the what they've been doing with the flyweight. We've seen Joanna and what she could do on a big pay-per-view that lots of people saw. But when it comes down to we know how good Penne is. People know how good she is. But she's not on the forefront. There's nothing about her that everyone's like, oh, my God, I can't wait to see this. And I think, unfortunately, that's kind of the downfall. And to see this title fight, you have to have Fight Pass. I know they're hoping that people will order it for this title fight, but I don't think that these are the two fighters that they would like to have on their first ever title fight. Both of these ladies deserve to be in a title bout, but I don't think this is the one that's going to get people, oh my God, I have to order Fight Pass to check this title fight out.
Well, I think people are really taking towards Joanna. I think that performance really kind of opened the eyes to her, and I think that she's kind of slowly but surely drawing in quite a big fan base. And so I think, if anything, they'll be getting Fight Pass if they haven't got it already because of her, not so much because she's fighting Jessica Penne. And I think the UFC's maybe banking more on Joanna than they are Jessica Penne. It just happens that they thought Penne was the most ready to take the shot. And also, let's factor in the fact that this fight's in Berlin. Now, I know Joanna's not from Germany, but Poland's not that far from Germany. And I think that had a lot to do with putting the title fight there and on Fight Pass and all that stuff. I don't think if this was event in Australia or somewhere else, probably doesn't get a fight like this. But I think being in Berlin, they kind of decided to go with this, and it'll be interesting to see whether it kind of pays off, Dave. Like you said, is this going to draw people to the Fight Pass? That's the hope, but we'll see. And if it goes good, they may have more title fights on Fight Pass. If it doesn't, they'll probably won't try it again.
Yeah, I wonder if they will if there'll be a big push for both of these ladies, have them on UFC Tonight, have them on all the the different fights, have them at the fights to kind of promote themselves so that people can fall in love with them, I guess. Fall in love with them all over again. Yeah, because this is it could be a big deal. I don't think it's going to be. I don't think this is the one that people are gonna flock to. But stranger things have happened.
All right, the other matchup I want to talk about at 155 pounds, John Medeski against Donald Cerrone. Now, of course, originally Donald Cerrone was supposed to fight Khabib Nurmagomedov as one of the big fights there for UFC 187 coming up here in a couple weeks. And, you know, the lightweight rankings, Dave, we have Cerrone listed as 4, Khabib at 6. And obviously Medeski's nowhere near any of those guys. Looking at some of the other guys we have. Excuse me.
Jim's going to die.
Josh Thompson's currently injured. Donald Cerrone, we have Eddie Alvarez at 8. Donald Cerrone's already beat him, and I believe just booked an upcoming matchup. We have Will Brooks at 9, but of course Will Brooks is not in the UFC. Michael Johnson at 10. He is currently scheduled to fight Ben Henderson. Obviously, he's already fought Ben Henderson 3 times. I'm going to have him fight him 4 times. Jim Miller's coming off a loss. Bobby Green just had a fight booked. Miles Jury is going to fight Anthony Pettis coming up. Tony Ferguson maybe would have been a guy, Dave, to step up. That could have been a nice matchup. I don't think he had a fight scheduled.
Yeah. I really think it comes down to this, Jim. McDessie got out of his last fight quick. He's got to be close on weight. He's got 3 weeks to make sure that he's on weight, and he wants to get back in there quick. It's a safe fight. If Cerrone wins, he took care of a guy that he was supposed to beat. If McDessie wins, he kind of shocked the world, but it doesn't really upset the rankings all that much. Tony Ferguson is being brought along the right way, and I think that they want to give him fights that make sense. And I don't like the McDessie fight. Stylistically, it might be fun, but I think Cerrone deserves names, and I really think this is just a matter of McDessie was ready. And another thing, this is what these are called transitions. I think some of these guys are trying to front load their fights before July when that Reebok deal kicks in, because he already got money from his sponsors a month or a couple of weeks ago. Now he's going to get back in a couple of weeks, and he's going to get more money from sponsors. I think that's what some of these guys are trying to do, honestly, before July.
Well, the reason I don't like it is because this was supposed to be a number 1 contenders matchup with their winner getting a shot at the title. Regardless of the opponent, I think Cerrone gets the next title shot if he wins, whether it's John Medeski or it's Khabib. He wins on this card, he gets the next title shot. So I'm just saying to maybe Tony Ferguson, if he fought him and won, maybe he wouldn't get a title shot, but it does more for the division. If a guy like Tony Ferguson wins, he's in a lot better position than if John Medeski wins. Even if he wins, like you said, he would move up the rankings, it'd be shocking the world and all that sort of thing, but I don't think John Medeski still would be anywhere close to a title shot, and I don't think John Medeski has a chance to beat Donald Cerrone. I just think that, he's a pretty solid fighter, but let's be honest, his last fight was a catchweight bout against a guy coming in at about 2 weeks' notice in his hometown, Montreal, and he knocks him out in the first round. That's what I'm saying. It wasn't like he's coming off a great performance against another, notable guy, and he knocked him out in the first round. He fought a guy that was coming in on short notice and had never fought in the UFC before.
Yeah.
And now he's facing the number 4 guy, or number 3 guy in the world.
Right, and like you said, it was a victory over a guy he should have beat in his hometown. It was kind of a win-win situation for McDessie, and he took advantage of it. But, hey, I guess you can't fault him for getting back in there, right?
Well, I don't fault him for taking the matchup because, like you said, more money. There's not really a lot of negatives for him.
Right.
There's really only positives. And for Cerrone, it's kind of hard to say no, especially if that was the first guy they offered, because you're like, well, he's probably like, if I win, do I still get a title shot? They're like, yes. Then he goes, Like, all right, well, I'm probably going to beat the crap out of John Medesi, so why not? You know, for him, I don't think it really matters because obviously he's very confident he can win. And as long as he gets that title shot, what he's been working so hard for since coming over to the UFC, you know, I don't think it matters to him anymore. He just wants a shot at the belt. All right, let's get to the UFC Hall of Fame here before we get to this weekend's festivities. We have a new breakdown for the UFC Hall of Fame. Now, of course, the UFC Hall of Fame has been around for 12 years, and they're going to have a new induction event, which they have every year now at the annual UFC Fan Expo in Las Vegas, which will be July 11th, will be the ceremony. And it already has 12 inductees into the UFC Hall of Fame, but they're going to kind of retool it a little bit. They're going to have 4 different areas of the UFC Hall of Fame. They're going to have a modern era wing, which commemorates fighters who made their pro MMA debut in the modern era. They're going to have a pioneers era wing, commemorating fighters who made their pro MMA debut in the pioneers era. They're not saying when those eras take place or when they start or begin, but I got to imagine since the UFC started in 1993, probably 93 to 2000 or something, and then maybe 2002 to so on for modern, or something along those lines. Contributors wing, commemorating significant contributions outside of active competition, and the fight wing. They're going to have the greatest and most important bouts in the sport's history. And also, they're thinking about making a physical location somewhere in Las Vegas, but nothing has happened yet. And I kind of like this, Dave. We kind of talked about this restructuring a while ago, maybe having like a pride section or having, like people like a Joe Rogan, like announcers or people who have contributed that weren't fighters. We kind of have talked about this in the past, having maybe different sections like other sports do within their Hall of Fames, but the UFC has finally decided to do this after 12 years now. They haven't announced of the 12 current inductees how those guys are going to be placed in there, but I believe now they said Stephan Bonner was technically in, but to me Stephan Bonner shouldn't be in as himself. He should be in when they go to most important bouts. His bout against Forrest Griffin to me is what really should be in the Hall of Fame, not so much him himself.
Correct.
And you could probably even make a case saying that for Forrest Griffin himself as well, but that's neither here. You can, at least he won a title. You can make it a little more, maybe legitimate about him being a Hall of Famer. But either way, Dave, do you like the new kind of sectioning up of the Hall of Fame?
Yeah, I like it. When they do stuff like important bouts, that seems like a surefire way to get somebody in there who probably doesn't have the greatest record. For a fact Liz Carmouche is going to go into that because of her first fight with Ronda. Miocic Tate will probably be in there because of stuff that she did with Ronda. There's going to be stuff like that. Whoever was the first strawweight fight, girls like that are going to be in there. If it's the UFC Hall of Fame, I don't really care to put the Pride era guys in there, even though they bought it. I just want the UFC guys in there. And I hope it doesn't get out of control. Like, Dan Severn and those guys from back in the day, the guys that should be in there, Art Jimerson and stuff like that. They should definitely be in there. But let's not get too carried away and start putting in guys that fought back then. You know what I mean? Like, just because you fought back then doesn't mean you need to be in the Hall of Fame. My point would be our good friend Brian Ebersol's got, 7 or 8 UFC fights? I'm the biggest Ebersol fan that there is. Just because he was in the UFC, that doesn't mean he needs to be in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I hope it doesn't get carried away like that.
Right. And I think for the Pride thing, it would be cool, especially you can kind of go into the pioneers category, I think, with some of the Pride guys. But I think it would just be cool because to me, the Hall of Fame should be kind of for the fans. The way of fans kind of honoring who was great and visiting, like they said, an actual location. And I just think that would be cool. If you're trying to attract people to a physical location, fans still revere Pride to this day. Here we are 8 years after the organization closed. And I just think that would be a cool way to honor how great that organization was. And if they can, it doesn't always have to be one member a year, but if it's maybe every other, every other year or something, they can add in a Pride member along with whoever they're inducting as a UFC member for that year. And I think there were enough guys in Pride that you can put in this organization. I mean, just off the top of my head, you can put in, you don't have to put in Wanderlei as a UFC fighter. You put him as a Pride fighter. Fedor, Gomi, Sakuraba, Shogun could be in as like a Pride fighter instead of a UFC fighter if you wanted to. I mean, there are so many, more names I'm not even mentioning here, but yeah, there were definitely a lot of great fighters I think you can put in there.
Yeah, definitely. I wonder, it would be kind of weird though, wouldn't it, to put like Rampage in as a member of Pride, but not the UFC?
Honestly, I think because he was never a Pride champion, he would be a UFC Hall of Famer. Maybe it could be like the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame kind of sort of, where you can be in like as in one band, but also be in as like a solo act. Like Paul McCartney's in there 3 times. Like he's in there for himself, Wings, and the Beatles.
That's like Hulk Hogan. He's in the WWE Hall of Fame as Hulk Hogan, the NWO, and somebody else, or Triple H. One of the wrestlers is like, he's in there for like 3 different things because he was a part of all these different factions.
So yeah, it could even be something like that as well.
Cool. You think they'll start streaming that on Fight Pass when they put people in?
I think they should. Why not? I mean, they have the capabilities.
Speaking of streaming stuff, Jim, did you see that Metamoris? Is that what it's called? The jiu-jitsu stuff?
Yeah. Apparently they're not going to have any fans or media at their next event.
Yeah, that's like he's gonna pull off a slick submission, and it's gonna be like.
So I guess that's Metamoris' response to the Baltimore riots.
Yeah. Nice.
It's just not having anyone in attendance. They're like, you know what, fans of Baltimore, you got to calm down here. So we're not going to have anyone for our event.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
As this event takes place in Los Angeles or something. I don't know. It's weird because, I mean, part of the Metamoris thing is kind of seeing like old MMA legends do grappling. So I'm not really sure. Like, it's almost kind of for the fans. Really, it's not really for these guys. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's weird because isn't the idea of Metamoris? I mean, maybe I'm way off base here. Am I frozen? No,
you're good. You're good.
It looks like I was frozen. Isn't the idea to kind of get the jiu-jitsu like out in front of people? Maybe I'm off base here, but isn't that the idea? Like you're putting on an event. Put it this way, Jim. If Metamoris came to Detroit, I would probably drive up there. If they came to Chicago, I bet maybe you'd be semi-interested if there were names. I'm interested in it, but I'm not ordering it. I'm not that interested in it because I don't understand jiu-jitsu. Like I don't understand the technical points, like how you score and all that kind of. I don't get that. But I'm not about to plop down another $10 to order it via pay-per-view. If I could find a stream somewhere or whatever, I would. But if you lived in Los Angeles and you couldn't make it, would you order it on pay-per-view?
Maybe, but I just think it's weird that you're basically just, he had all these events, which to me, as far as I know, went pretty good. Fans seem to like them, and they're just now going to have this event, just not fans there. I don't know. I think that's weird. I mean, I know their goal at the end of the day maybe isn't to make a lot of money, but I mean, you still got to pay these guys to work, right? And what's the easiest way to pay these guys to work is to sell tickets and merchandise.
So if somebody gets caught in a triangle and nobody witnesses it, did it actually happen?
I don't think so, as far as I know. Oh man. All right. Well, I guess it's an interesting experiment. We'll see if it works out, but I think you kind of alienate fans in the process. But last item, real quick here, Dave. You were talking about that Reebok deal. UFC executives have outlined the payout from the UFC contract. And of course, it was originally scheduled by rankings, now scheduled on how many bouts you've had in your career. And it will start out at $2,500 for your first 5 bouts in the UFC. And from 6 to 10 bouts, you will receive $5,000. For 11 to 15, 10 grand. 16 to 20, 15 grand. 21 bouts or more, 20 grand. And if you're a title challenger, regardless of the fight, you will get 30 grand. And if you are the champion, you will get 40 grand regardless. So that is kind of the breakdown. And, I don't know how much most fighters make per sponsorship. I'm sure, those guys at this, 1 to 10, that's only like 7,500 total. I'm sure they could maybe make somewhere in between those. I'm sorry, 5,000 for 6 to 10, 2,500. I'm sure, you can maybe make a little more than that for those 2 brackets. But I think kind of moving forward with the other price brackets, kind of when you get over 10 bouts, Dave, I'm sure if we talk to most fighters, that aren't champions or, top 5, that's probably about what they make, if not more. So I can't imagine most fighters having that much of a problem with it. I could be wrong. I think people are probably always going to have problems with when things change. But from some of the fighters we have spoken to, we know they don't make that much in sponsorships anyways. So this actually might be a way for them to make more money, not including, we've talked about many times, the new creative ways they can do sponsorships with companies as well.
Right. A couple of things. I spoke to my brother, Steve Sadler, and he mentioned to me a couple of things, and I'm going to look at my phone. A couple of things here. First of all, think about it this way. The number 1 women's bantamweight contender, Kat Zingano, how many UFC fights does she have?
Including her fight with Ronda, I think she has 3, right?
2. Oh, yes. 3. I forgot about Amanda Nunes. So she's the number 1 women's number 1 contender, basically, right? They're going to give her the same as if our good friend Cody Bollinger got a call to the UFC tomorrow. They both make the same. She's the number 1 contender, and she's making $2,500. To go back, Brian Ebersol's got how many fights? And Eddie Wineland, how many fights does he have in Zuffa? He's in that above 10, so he's going to make a pretty penny. I'm not saying one of them's better than the other, but that's what's a little bit kind of thrown off. Somebody who is fighting in an amateur fight right now can make more pay than Kat Zingano. And, it's things like that, and especially like the strawweight division where, Felice Herrig, I guarantee you she can make at least $2,500 in sponsorship.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, there's always going to be fighters that will have and can make more than these limits, regardless of how many bouts. But then they're going to be some fighters that make nothing or struggle to make something like that. And again, this does not preclude any other type of out of the cage sponsorships that we've kind of talked several times, but it does put some fighters, like you mentioned, Kat Zingano, coming off a title fight, in an interesting position because she's only had 3 fights in the UFC, so she's still in the 1 to 5 bracket.
How about this?
It's gonna have its kinks to start, and like I said, not everyone's gonna like it initially, but I still think that I think maybe what I guess I don't like the most about it, Dave, is not simply that you just have to wear like Reebok as your gear and stuff. That you can't even just put like one logo. Like you couldn't get like whatever you thought your best sponsor was. You couldn't just get like that one logo on there. Like for instance, you mentioned Kat Zingano. I know Muscle Farm has sponsored her a lot. Like she couldn't just get one Muscle Farm logo on there or something. Like they couldn't be like, you can get one on there.
Right. Or like,
you
would think that would open up the door for Reebok, Muscle Farm and Reebok.
Maybe right. I mean, like the Reebok logo is still there. I'm not saying the Reebok logo is going to block, but maybe if they could just allow one.
Yeah, but I'm saying, think of maybe you could open up avenues of more advertisement with Muscle Farm. Like get all the Muscle Farm athletes in Reebok. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Open it up. Like, I don't know what Dynamic Fasteners is, but if that's your big guy, like maybe they can work with Reebok. I don't know.
Yeah.
But another thing, there's a prominent Invicta main eventer that'll kind of remain nameless because I don't know how much I should tell you, but they were able to get that person at more than $2,500 for that person's last main event fight. And that's in Invicta. So I don't know. It's crazy because what wasn't that deal like $12 million or $1.2 million was the Reebok deal in total? It was some huge number. And
it was like $70 million over 6 or 7 years or something.
I think that was Fox.
No, it was the Reebok deal.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, it averaged out to like $10 million a year or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess my point is $2,500 for somebody in the UFC. I really feel like it should be higher. I feel like guys that are fighting on high level pro shows, Invicta, Titan. If you're in the main event or the co-main event or a champion, you're easily making $2,500. But one thing that this conversation does do, it seems like fighters need to be better prepared. And it kind of, I feel like it's going to do away with managers a little bit. What's a manager's job? If I'm your manager, my job is to get you sponsors and I guess basically get a phone call every once in a while from Joe Silva, right?
Yeah.
I mean, do managers pretty much go by let's say I'm your manager and you're getting 20-20 for your fights in the UFC. Are you going to give me a cut of that? I didn't get you any sponsors, and all I did was answer the phone when they called to say, hey, do you want to fight Darren Cruikshank?
Well, I don't think managers go by the wayside, Dave. Just maybe the amount of compensation they get, the percentage, maybe lessens. Maybe instead of getting, let's say a manager got 5%, maybe now they only getting 2%.
Right. That's fair.
So just the amount of money they're going to get lessens. And yeah, like you said, maybe that first bracket could be 5,000 and then the second bracket 7,500, and you can kind of leave where it's at with the 11 to 15 at 10 grand moving forward. And I think that might be a little better starting because 25 is pretty low, especially when, like you said, regardless of where you're fighting, you're now in the UFC. That should mean more than $2,500.
Well, one thing that I have to say, I've seen some fighters. I think Miles Jury was one. Cody Gibson was one. Here's the other thing too. There's I tweeted it. Twitter.com/vigilante juice. That's where you can get me on Twitter. Click that little follow button. I'll follow you back. Trying to get some followers. I tweeted this out earlier. If you're in the UFC and you disagree with the Reebok deal, there's two things that you can do. One, you can ask for your release and go toil around in Bellator or Titan or wherever you think you can make a lot more sponsorship money, or you can deal with it. Those are really your only two options.
Right.
And Miles Jury tweeted out a picture of him throwing Reebok stuff in the garbage can.
I saw that.
Like, okay, at my job, if I threw my uniforms in the garbage can and took a picture like, screw this place, do you think I'm going to have a job there again? Like, I represent that company. You know what I mean? Like, regardless of the fact you're in the UFC and you have to represent Reebok, if you don't like it, if you have that strong of convictions, take a hike. You know, I guarantee you, if Miles Jury says, I'd like my release from my contract, they're going to be like, all right, cool. It's less money they got to pay.
Yeah, I mean, I think Rampage said it best. You know, he tried to do it outside the UFC. You know, then he goes, I couldn't do it because you can't do it. He goes, you got to be here. He goes, this is the place to be, for better or worse.
Right.
And you know, you may not agree with everything the UFC does, but at the end of the day, they're the top organization. And if you want to fight the best people, you're going to have to be in the UFC. And if you don't think that the UFC is moving in the right direction with Reebok, then yeah, you know, you can post all the pictures you want on social media of you throwing Reebok stuff in the garbage. But until you make an actual stand and don't fight for the UFC and don't represent Reebok that way, then you're not really accomplishing anything.
Right. And just remember this. If you, Miles Jury, I don't know how many people he has. Right. But however many Twitter followers he has, do you think that, how many of those do you think he had before he made the UFC? It's because of the UFC that you can make a post on Twitter and people are like, oh my God, that guy's right. You know what I mean? Like, the UFC is giving you what you have. It drives me nuts. Dude, $2,500. Like, that pays for my entire trip to New Orleans to see Brian's fight. You know what I'm saying? Like, to put on a pair of shorts. They're giving you everything that you need for a week. You don't have to pack anything. Like, it literally drives me nuts. I could go on and on. Hold on one second. I'm trying to find this because this perfect.
You know, there's a line in Lord of the Rings.
Perfectly explains where I'm at.
Anyone you want next?
Hold on one second here. This will all make.
Like him, he's an absolute animal.
Okay, because I'm hearing audio. I don't know if our listeners are. Something about someone was talking about Lord of the Rings, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
What
Okay.
Dave's preaching for.
Yep. Here we go. It goes to the point where that we were talking about a little bit earlier about. I'm gonna screen grab it in just a second. Like you were saying, Jim. Like, you can try to get out of. Like Rampage said, you can try to get out of go make more money in Bellator, right? But at the end, everybody wants those three little letters, and it's not working. Anyway, I found an interview that Brian did, and it's like, it's ridiculous because it doesn't matter how many fights you have in the UFC. It seems like if you don't finish in the UFC, you'll always just be an MMA fighter, not a UFC fighter. George St. Pierre will always be a UFC champion, you know. And it's just, the UFC is where you need to be. If you don't get fully compensated for signing these Topps cards, you got money for signing a card. Like, shut up. Like, it drives me nuts. They get paid to sign their name. When's the last time somebody gave you $1 to sign your name, Jim?
As far as I know, no one has yet. But that could change.
Or when's the last time you got paid to put clothes, like to put a certain type of clothing on? Like, I get it. Floyd Mayweather makes millions and millions of dollars. That's one person in the entire sport of boxing. You know what I'm saying? God, it drives me nuts. I could argue and yell at you for the next hour and a half. It literally fires me up. I can't stand it.
All right. Well, let's get to the fights this weekend, Dave. Maybe those will fire you up a little bit. 4 fights here on the Fight Pass main card for UFC Fight Night. Adelaide, Australia. Looking at the first fight of the evening, will be at 155 pounds, as 2 former Ultimate Fighter contestants will battle each other, as James Vick will take on Jake Matthews. James Vick, of course, undefeated, 7-0 in his career, known as the Texecutioner. He's listed at 6'3", taking on Jake Matthews, who is listed at, I believe, 5'10", known as the Celtic Kid. He's from Australia. He was on the Tough Nation season, if you're wondering what season of the Ultimate Fighter he was on. And, of course, James Vick, speaking of our good friend Derek Cruikshank, he defeated Darren Cruikshank on that Tough Live season, Faber versus Cruz. And so far, since the show, James Vick has remained undefeated in his career, 3-0 so far in the UFC. His last fight was a win over Nick Hine at the Fight Night Edgar versus Swanson. And he has 3 submissions of his 7 victories. And also Jake Matthews, undefeated in his career, 8-0. He is so far 2-0 since his time on Tough Nations. He defeated Wagner Rocha in his last fight, which was also in Australia, submitting him in the second round. Kind of looking at this matchup, Dave, I think if it stays standing, I think James Vick, not just height-wise and reach-wise, has the advantage, but I just think the overall striking skill has the advantage. But if Jake Matthews can somehow get inside and get this thing to the ground, I think he has an advantage. And also, I think Jake Matthews is probably a little better conditioned. James Vick, obviously, as we said, big guy, 6'3", I think does have to have a pretty severe weight cut to make 155. And as we've kind of seen in this couple of fights, kind of fades as the fight goes on. That's, I think, part conditioning and part because of output. He doesn't really pace himself very well. He throws a lot in that first round, and then that doesn't really help him out in rounds 2 and 3. But a guy that is, like I said, very tall, very lengthy, very strong, can hit hard. And I think this is an intriguing matchup. Both young guys in the division, both undefeated, and both kind of have a contrasting of styles. And once again, Matthews fighting at home in Australia, that always, I think, kind of gives an advantage. But I think this is going to be a close fight, and I think it's going to be an entertaining one.
Yeah, there's a couple of things that I remember, or that I know. Vic is about 4.5 inches taller, and he's got a 76-inch reach advantage, a 76-inch reach. I can't find what it is for Matthews. Can't find his reach, but if he can use that, if Vic can use that to his advantage and keep a pretty good pace, keep a pretty calm pace, I think Vic can be victorious in this fight. This is also, if you go back and look, I don't think, I'm looking at all of his past fights. He's got 7 professional fights, and then the Ultimate Fighter. He's never left the United States. So not only is this his first time out of the States for a fight, which the Australia, Brian told me it takes about 3.5, 4 days to get that out of your system to where you're feeling good. Is he able to do that? Matthews is, and another point is Matthews is undefeated. He's from Australia. He's at home. And like they say, Jim, I'm pretty sure I'm not sure who they is, but they do say this, that somebody's O has got to go.
That is true.
Did you hear somebody say that one?
I've heard that one before.
I've choked him up, folks.
I've heard that one before. All right, the next fight of the evening will be at 205 pounds as Sean O'Connell will take on Anthony Perosh. Of course, Anthony Perosh has been in the UFC for a while now, dating back to UFC 110. Overall in the UFC, he is 5-3. His last fight was a win over Carlos Filo back at the Fight Night there in Sydney. And of his 15 career victories, he has 10 submissions. Looking at Sean O'Connell, he is 1-2 in the UFC. He got his first victory in the UFC in his last fight at the Fight Night in Boston earlier this year over Matt Van Buren, knocking him out in the third round. And of his 16 career victories, 8 are by knockout. Kind of looking over this matchup, Dave. Both are veterans of the sport. Obviously, Perosh has been around 10 years longer, but still both guys have over 25 professional fights. And I don't know. this matchup I'm not as excited about, and excuse me, not really sure what's going to happen. I guess more of a grappling based fight, which if it does, I think that lends towards Perosh. He's a really good grappler, and again, hometown thing. I don't think Sean O'Connell. He's listed as being from Utah. Kind of looking over some of his fights here, it doesn't look as though he has left the U.S., but I'm not 100% sure about that. He has fought in Canada, but that's not that far to travel.
Right.
But definitely, I don't think he's fought anywhere like Australia, and that like you said in the other matchup, I think that can be a factor as well. And I don't know. I guess I won't give my pick away. I think Perosh is the pick here. And, there's some other good fights on this card, Dave. And no offense to Perosh. I know he's kind of somewhat of a MMA legend for Australia, but I think our good friend Sam Alvey and his fight against Dan Kelly should have been here on the main card instead of this one, if I had to venture a guess.
Does it feel like Anthony Perosh has been in the UFC like forever?
Yeah, like I said, UFC 110 was his debut.
No,
that was
UFC 61 was his debut.
Oh, I'm sorry. So actually, his UFC record is 5-4. I missed that, but his return to the UFC was at 110. He fought twice.
He fought.
Yeah.
I was still in the Marine Corps.
Yeah, that was his debut. UFC 61. Then he fought UFC 66, and then he hadn't fought. Then he didn't fight for the UFC again until fighting Mirko Krokop at UFC 110. So.
Ridiculous, right?
Excuse me, I stand corrected. I didn't scroll far enough down on his list. There are fights there. I kind of missed it. I mean, both were losses, so it's not like he made an impression that, oh, yeah, he made his fight at UFC 61 losing. In fact, he got knocked out by Jeff Munson, who's pretty good. So, was pretty good, I should say. But yeah, he's definitely been around a while. He's 42 now.
Yeah. No, like you said, there's probably a couple better matchups. Like you said, he's a legend for Australia. A hometown guy, all that good stuff. But there's a couple other fights I wouldn't mind seeing. You even got Kyle Noak on there. The Dan Kelly, Sam Alvey is a good one you can put on there. Even the Beck Rawlings would be good just to get a little more spotlight on the ladies on the 115-pound division. But not to really give away my pick, but I'm going to side with you, I think.
Now, this next fight, Dave, I'm actually excited for here in the middleweight division, as former Ultimate Fighter winner Robert Whitaker will take on Brad Tavares. Looking at Brad Tavares, pretty impressive record so far in the UFC since debuting on the Ultimate Fighter season 11. He only has lost 3 times in the UFC, and at one point he had a 5-fight winning streak overall, 8-3 in the UFC. The last fight was a victory over Nate Marquardt at UFC 182, and of his 13 career victories, 7 are by decision. Looking at Robert Whitaker, he now has a record of 13-4, with 6 of those victories coming by way of knockout. Since coming on Tough Nations, he has developed a 4-2 record in the UFC, but is now fighting at 185 pounds. In his middleweight debut back in November, he knocked out Clint Hester in the second round, which to you and I, Dave, was a pretty big upset. So this kid, Robert Whitaker, despite maybe being a little undersized from 185, still has proven that he has a lot of power. Obviously, fighting at home in Australia, obviously an advantage. Brad Tavares originally from Hawaii, so I think the travel, Dave, actually won't affect him as much as maybe some other guys from the States. That's not as far as travel going to Hawaii to Australia, so I think he should be okay, maybe compared to some of the other Americans flying over. And obviously, looking at this fight, I would say Whitaker has the better power of the two, but as far as technical skills go, Brad Tavares is a very technical guy, and I think Whitaker, size-wise and height, they're not that much different, but I think Tavares has the better reach, and I think he's going to have a tough time kind of dealing with that. I think he's going to have trouble getting on the inside, Dave, and landing some of those power punches. And I think that may lead to Brad Tavares using those excellent kickboxing skills and leading to a victory. Again, the X factor is, coming from a smaller weight class, will that speed advantage, how prevalent will that be? That's one factor I'm not sure about. And if he can be fast and get out, that being Whitaker, he definitely has a chance to win. But I think this is going to be a good fight, and a good fight to me to judge whether Whitaker should stay on this path of staying at 185 or drop back down to 170. Brad Tavares has beaten some tough guys in this division, and he's a good measuring stick to kind of know whether or not you can make it in the middleweight division. Yeah,
Tavares is a measuring stick for that 185 division. After coming off of 2 losses, like you said, to Boch and Romero, he was able to beat Nate Marquardt back in January, but he can't be happy with that. He's ranked, what does it say, 14? Yeah, He's ranked 14 by the UFC, and I'm sure that he would like to get a little bit higher. So I would expect to see a determined Tavares to come out. And I think that, like you said, Jim, I think it was perfectly said, actually, that Whitaker, that when this is a fight for Whitaker, even with a loss in this fight, if he hangs well, cardio's not an issue, power's not an issue, maybe he doesn't get the victory in this fight, but I think that this will let him know where he needs to be, which division he can call home, which is where he needs to be. So a lot to learn in this fight, and even a win for Whitaker, he still may decide that 170 is where it's at. But this is an excellent co-main event.
Let's get to the main event of the evening in the heavyweight division, as Mark Hunt will take on Stipe Miocic. Looking at Mark Hunt, since moving over to the UFC from Dream and Pride and K1 and all the other organizations he fought in, he has so far developed a record of 5-3 with 1 draw. His last fight was a loss for the interim UFC heavyweight title to Fabricio Verdum back at UFC 180. And of his 10 career victories, 7 are by knockout. Looking at Stipe Miocic, so far in the UFC, he has amassed a record of 6-2. His last fight was a loss to Junior Dos Santos in a card he headlined with JDS on Fox back in December of last year. And of his 12 career victories, 8 are by knockout. And I think this one's kind of similar to the last one, Dave. You got maybe a little shorter guy there and Mark Hunt, and a taller guy there in Miocic, kind of similar to Whitaker and Tavares a little bit. But basically, if Mark Hunt can get inside, he can easily knock out Stipe Miocic. There's no doubt about that.
Or any other human.
Right. But if Stipe does what he's capable of, and I think you saw that in the Junior Dos Santos fight, moving in and out, showing great kickboxing, and also some great clinch work. He had some good clinch shots against Junior Dos Santos. I just think that he is a more complete fighter than Mark Hunt. I think he has more tools to win a fight than Mark Hunt. And I'm not saying Mark Hunt can't knock out Stipe, but I mean, Stipe went toe-to-toe with Dos Santos for 25 minutes, Dave, and didn't get knocked out. And that guy hits hard as well. I think that's got to count for something. I think that also maybe the reemergence of his, idol and now training partner, Mirko Cro Cop, I think maybe has also maybe kind of give him a new rebirth in this things for this fight. And being a guy like Mark Hunt, was just 1 fight away from fighting, being a UFC interim champion, I think means a lot. And I think for Stipe, as much as that fight was fun and close against Dos Santos, he still lost and, needs a win to kind of bounce back. And I think if he can get it, he's right back in the thick of things, Dave. The heavyweight division is not really that deep. I mean, he comes back, beats Mark Hunt. He's right back kind of where he was in December, on the cusp of the title shot.
Yeah, it's not a huge division to crawl back through. No, our good friend from our good friend John from Combat Cardboard asked us about this fight, and if it's a technical brawl, this is what I told him. If it's a technical brawl, I think Stipe has full advantage. If it's just a brawl, just two guys swinging, I don't think Stipe has the advantage. The thing with somebody like Mark Hunt, he's very beatable, but you have to be perfect on your defense. You cannot let him have open shots on you. There's always got to be something in the way. You got to push something away. You almost have to be perfect the whole time. And if you make a mistake, he's a guy that's going to make you pay. It's really, I think it's that simple.
And I think this is a great main event, to be quite honest. I think Mark Hunt, regardless of, what you think about the guy's, weight issues or attitude or whatnot, the guy has not, I don't think, ever had a boring fight. The guy brings it every single time. And I think Stipe is starting to develop into one of the better heavyweights in the world. And I think this is a great place to showcase it. And it should be fun. It's a nice little card. If you look it over from top to bottom, Dave, this is actually a really solid card. And for those of you who don't have Fight Pass, I know we're talking about, you should get it because of the title fight or whatever. Well, this is a pretty good one to get Fight Pass for.
Oh, yeah.
If this is, or at least check out the free preview. This is definitely a good one. There's some good fights on there, but let's do what we do best, Dave. Let's get to picks. First fight of the evening, 155 pounds. James Vick against Jake Matthews. I think this is going to be a good one, but maybe going against my better judgment. I think James Vick is the favorite, but I'm going to go with the hometown kid, Jake Matthews there in Australia. I think maybe his grappling skills might be too much for Vick to handle, so I'll go with the Celtic Kid, as he's known as.
Yeah, I want to side with you, but I'm going to go with Vick, even though it seemed like I was going to go the other way earlier.
Anthony Perosh against Sean O'Connell against 205 pounds. The only fight I'm not excited for on the main card, but I'll go with the guy known as the Hippo, Anthony Perosh here to win this one.
The Hippo?
Yeah, that's his nickname.
That's ridiculous.
You think that would be Mark Hunt's nickname, but it's not. It's it's Anthony Perosh's nickname.
Maybe maybe Mark Hunt's 25'9". Or no, 26'9", right? 25, yeah, 26'9".
No. If anything, Mark Hunt's maybe 24, like 20 hours a day, 4 days a week.
Nice. No, I'll go with Perosh.
All right, co-main event of the evening, Brad Tavares against Robert Whittaker. I actually really like both guys, Dave. This should be a good fight, but I'm going to go with the maybe the little bigger guy here, as much as maybe it kind of pains me, but I'm going to go with Brad Tavares here.
Yeah, I hope to see a lot from Robert Whittaker. And like you said, to get him in a home where he needs to be. He has the ability to walk out with the victory in this fight, but I'm just feeling Brad Tavares in this one.
Main event, Mark Hunt against Stipe Miocic, heavyweight division. Again, should be a great fight, but I think just Stipe has a lot more tools at his disposal than Mark Hunt, not to mention, the height and reach factor. So give you the man from Euclid, Ohio to win this one.
Yeah, it's weird. Done talking, but your mouth was moving on here. I'm going to go with Stipe for the victory. Mark Hunt can win any fight in the UFC in any division, just like that. But I think that Stipe knows what's on the line, and I think we're going to see a pretty determined Stipe in this fight. So give me Stipe Miocic.
All right, any final thoughts here before we end the show, Dave?
Yeah, what a ripoff that Mayweather fight was, huh? Sure, I'm glad I paid for that. What a joke.
I'm glad I didn't pay for that fight. Sorry.
Well, we need to hang up this call before Jim dies.
I know, man. Oh, sorry there. I guess I need to take another cough drop. No, yeah, glad I did not pay for that either. $100. Do you think there will ever be a day that the UFC will have a $100 pay-per-view?
No. Here's the thing. I would pay $100 for UFC pay-per-view if it was stacked. This is like they showed 2 other fights with 2 people I've never even heard of before. You know what I mean? And then our good friend Ray Flores is announcing, I think Canelo, the guy that just fought Mayweather recently, is fighting at Minute Maid Park in Houston this week. They couldn't throw millions of dollars around for that and get him on the undercard, at least a name I've heard of. And this grinds my gears right here. Millions of dollars, $100 pay-per-view, and the only person that they could pick to sing the national anthem was an actor. Jamie Foxx sang the national anthem.
He has an album.
You couldn't have like Beyonce like floating above the ring or something.
He sang that song, "Blame It on the Alcohol, Baby." You don't remember that one? No. Okay. Well, he was also in Gold Digger with Kanye West.
No.
Remember that one?
Anyway,
he does not own popular music. All right. Now we know if there was ever a doubt, it is now confirmed that Dave only listens to Garth Brooks and no one else. So now we know.
That is,
and of course, Ben Henderson's walkout song. That's it. That's the extent of his non-Garth Brooks iPod collection.
Hold on.
All right. Well, he is the.
Do you have to thank anybody?
No. I was gonna throw out your Twitter handle there because you're pleading for followers earlier at Vigilante Juice. They're on Twitter. Dave doesn't want you to, but you can follow me on Twitter if you want at Jim Graham. And yeah, it's been a lot of fun this week. Sorry again for coughing. I'll try my best. Hopefully next week, not coughing. I can get rid of this and return back to my normal self. So, all right, for the Juice, Dave Sadler, I'm your host, Jim Graham, and thank you for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast.